Hypertime to podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Hypertime to podcast. And we are bringing you another episode. This one's gonna, I was gonna say fill you with something light, but I think both of us might disagree after having read it. So I'm your host, Josh Miller, and join me to talk about this less than stellar issue is my co-host, Allan Muir. Allan, how are you?
I'm slightly worse after reading this.
Yeah, I was really bummed because, we've read plenty of issues so far that kind of dive this far back, but this one was probably my least favorite so far.
Yeah, the previous ones we've done in this time period, they've had some extra kick to them. This was just, aside from, as I mentioned in the chat, aside from the Green Lantern story, everything else just felt like I was constantly checking the page count or the page details to see how far, if I was done with it yet.
Yeah, I was doing the exact same thing. I was just dreading every time I look, like, I'm not even close to finish yet, am I? Just page after page. And I'm like, I hate these stories. I hate these characters. I hate everything I'm reading pretty much. But yeah, we are talking about All American Comics 16 in particular. We are touching on this mainly for one reason, and that is the introduction of one of the best superheroes in comics in the Green Lantern. But not Hal Jordan Green Lantern, not Kyle Rayner, John Stewart. We're talking about the original, the Alan Scott Green Lantern. And truth be told, I'm not really too knowledgeable on Alan Scott. I've definitely read stories with him in it, and really outside of Earth 2, I haven't really delved too deep into the character as a whole, mainly because I've always been a little confused when it came to Starheart and all that stuff.
Yeah, he's been one of the characters. He suffers from what I call Hawkman syndrome, where up until recently they didn't know how to properly explain his connection to things. This was when 1940.
Yep.
So after Green Lantern gets rebooted by Gil Kane and John Byrne, it sort of raised more questions. Like, he became sort of a continuity problem. I'm gonna make a Doctor Who reference. There's a character on there called the Valyard, who is technically a future version of the Doctor, and he showed up in 1986 and didn't appear since. And it turns out that the BBC, or not the BBC, people who have worked on the show afterwards were told they could not use him because he is I can't recall exactly how they worded it, but they just said he's like a canonical nightmare because it's so hard to explain where he would fit in with things.
Yeah, I feel like Alan Scott, as I was kind of reading up on a little bit on the character after this, they seem to be trying to force his way to explain his connection to the Green Lanterns and Oa and all that. And it definitely doesn't really make things much clearer. But they try. They're trying to connect that name back to him somehow. But
yeah, back when iFanboy was bigger than it was now, when the website was still going and they still had the written content and they still had the video show, they said that they expected Jeff Johns to say that use a lost piece of the battery of Oa, and then they joked around saying one of the Guardians would show up and say, what's with this guy, what's with the Poozer, cosmic copyright. And yeah, it's still great.
Well, what's not great is the majority of this issue. So I guess let's kind of talk about this a little bit. The majority of the focus I think we're going to try and do is mainly on the Green Lantern story, just because it's, I would argue, the best story out of here and the most important. And really, a lot of the other stuff I'd rather not talk about, just so I didn't have to waste everyone's time listening to it. But you know what? If you like to hear our pain, then keep listening, because we'll probably be venting a lot about what we've had to experience to get through this issue. Because it was rough. It was not easy to. I think it took me 3 days because I couldn't just sit down and do it in one. I was like, okay, I'm done here. I'm calling it quits. I'll move on to something else.
Yeah, I actually read this entire thing on my phone, which sort of made my descent into madness go happen quicker because I was reading it on an iPhone, and those things are very not that as compared to my iPad, which often use, which is basically my comics machine. Every time I think that must have been like 3 or 4 pages. No, it was 2 pages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird because, last time we were talking about Amazing Fantasy 15, and I feel like those stories all flew by as you were reading them. And, even the ones that weren't Spider-Man were only a couple pages long. And this one just felt like each one was like 10, 12 pages. I was like, God.
Also, I mean, it was probably easier to guess why we enjoyed Amazing Fantasy 15, considering it was technically Silver Age, and had more. Not to knock the writers and artists of this book, but the Amazing Fantasy 15 had technically, think about it, one main vision, or technically one writer, which makes everything easier. And Stanley, and this we had a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Sure did. I think anyone that has kind of read comics over the years, dating this far back, you can kind of tell how differently they're written too, from the 40s to the 60s to the 80s and all that. And a lot of these older ones don't really hold up as well as the later stuff. So, oh yeah, I say let's go ahead and start here and talk about the origins of All American Comics 16. Specifically with Green Lantern. So, in an effort to get into comics after art school and flirting with the possibility of going into theater as well, Martin Nodell would move from Chicago to New York in 1940, and he was kind of getting into comics a little bit. I can't remember if someone had mentioned it to him or if it was something he saw that he thought he might like. But while he was there, he decided to visit the All American offices after looking up their address in one of the comics he found. And up until then, he had made up several different samples when he met with Sheldon Mayer, who had given him a tip on exactly what they were looking for. Ideally, since superheroes were getting big after the success of Superman, Batman, and all that, Mayer basically said if Nodell could come up with a superhero too, then they would talk. And so Nodell, on his way home, was going different ideas in his head. But what he specifically wanted to touch on was something he was familiar with. And he had this reoccurring love with Chinese folklore and Greek mythology in particular that he was really thinking he should try and focus on when he was doing this character. And then on his way home, he went to a subway, and this is where things started to piece themselves together. There was a man waving a red lantern, which at that time meant, holding the train, don't come in. And then, after checking the tracks, he would start waving a green lantern, which would mean come in. And so it was at that point that Nodell wrote down the Green Lantern. And to him, the idea of the lantern being green seemed important. The lantern that was being used by the subway man at the time was actually what inspired the design of the lantern itself for the comics he was going to be drawing. And so at this point, he had a name. He kind of had this icon of the lantern in his head. And so he went to work on the rest. And he was picturing all these different possibilities, including this meteor that would fall into a small Chinese town, which is where the folklore part of it would come in, and where he would base the origins of this whole thing from. Then he would design the costume from his love with Greek mythology and add the cape for theatrical flair, since that was also something he was in love with. He said even the green slacks and the tights that Alan Scott was wearing were inspired by theater as well. Slippers were from a Greek costume inspiration. And then Nodell, when he was coming up with the costume, he says that it was inspired by a lot of the movies he had seen, particularly when it came to like movies with swordsmen, something pirate-esque in a way, which is why a lot of Alan Scott's clothing is more loose-fitting, especially like in the sleeves. And so he would start sketching out the character for when he took him back over to Sheldon Mayer. Now, the cowl itself was the idea of Mayer, but everything else from Alan's blonde hair, the cape, the colors, all of that was Nodell. He was even able to work in the Wagnerian ring cycle of 4 operas, which I don't know what that is, but him being the theater guy, that's all him, by including the very well-known Green Lantern ring. So I guess in Wagnerian operas, the way he described it is that the ring would go from a prince to people, and then it would go back to the prince again. And so he wanted to try and do something with the Green Lantern as well. And so he added the 24-hour regenerative ability to the ring so that as it was being used up, he could go back to the lantern and regain its power again when he would use the ring against the lantern. And so other than sketches of the character and the costume, he worked up 4 black and white pages for the character to define his origin. And this would include how the character was thinking, the concept of the strip and what it would be about, such as where the character was going, and then what he did to be defined as a hero, stuff like that, all within these 4 pages. And so after having all this worked up, he called Sheldon Mayer and they arranged to meet. Nodell ended up showing him everything, and after several days of not knowing what would happen, Mayer called him back and told him to come meet up with MC Gaines. And Nodell recalled this meeting with Gaines as a little odd because Gaines was quiet during the whole meeting. He said that after shuffling through his sketches and concept pages, he basically told Nodell, "This looks good to me. Get to work." Apparently, Gaines already knew he was going to accept it, but probably just kept Nodell on his toes just for the fun of it. And so after that, he decided to hammer everything out. To come up with the name of Alan Scott, he basically just pulled out a New York phone book and started looking through it. He said the 2 names that caught his interest, and he's not really sure why, was the name Alan and then Scott. And just like that, that's how Alan Scott came to be. Apparently, there are rumors that another name was going to be used called Alan Ladd, but Nodell has no idea about that. So if that was a possibility, that was someone else's idea. To him, it was always supposed to be Alan Scott, and that's the name that's always stuck. So,
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's because, or people insist that because of the actor, well-known actor at the time.
Oh, maybe.
His Alan Ladd Jr. was the man who is responsible for Star Wars becoming a thing.
So the incantation in particular was something that Nodell really wanted to get right. Since this was something that was very prominent in Chinese folklore and everything, this was something he wanted to really make sure fit the character well. But it couldn't just be an incantation. It had to be an oath. This wouldn't be seen until All American Comics 18, though. So it's actually never shown in this issue. However, that was something that would be changed with writer Alfred Bester down the road. I'm not sure if I remember right, that wasn't something Nodell had a choice in the matter in. It was just something that, sometimes writers just change what's going on with each book and characters and stuff. So I guess Alfred Bester did that with Alan Scott. And so when it came to the backstory, Nodell decided to make him a college graduate who was going to become an engineer, and specifically one that would help with bridge construction for trains. And this may be tied back to where he originally got the inspiration for the Green Lantern from, with on the subway and all that. But Nodell says he's not for sure of exactly how his mind pieced it together. If it's not, then it was just one hell of a coincidence. And so now he's got everything together. He's going to start writing this book and everything. And this is kind of where Bill Finger comes in. And so Nodell was supposed to be the writer on the book along as being the artist. And this was something that even Mayer and them were saying, yeah, can you do this? And so after he wrote up the synopsis for the story, they decided it may be more work than he could do, especially with what they had in store for Allan. And so they talked with him and just try to see if he would be okay with the art duties, which he was. And at that time, Nodell didn't really know anything about other creators, and he didn't know anything about Bill Finger either. But Bill Finger was the one who was brought on to help with writing parts of Green Lantern. Finger would look over what Nodell had already come up with, and then would apply other things that Nodell would think up of over time. And so they seem to work really well together, incorporate different ideas, and yeah, it worked out very well. And so that's why, even though Nodell is the one who came up with pretty much everything for the character, Bill Finger gets some of that credit as a co-creator, because not only was he technically the writer for it, but he did also add in some of those ideas as well. So, but something that bothered Nodell was the logo itself. He thought the character needed to have just one logo. And so he had worked up a logo that would be used for All American Comics 16, but then he was told to work up several more logos as the character would continue with follow-up appearances after that. And so by the time that Green Lantern #1 came around, he finally had something that would be considered the main logo. And so what you see, All Americans Comics 16 was that first logo that he would then have to change repeatedly up until Green Lantern #1. So unless you have something else to add to that, we can get into the stories of All American Comics 16.
Oh man, I wish I had something else I could do, because it's gonna be like it's gonna be work. It's definitely gonna be work.
Ready for some PTSD with this? Talking about all this again?
Yeah, I mean, I once had to read Ultimatum.
Oh, yeah.
So I've gone through worse.
Well, this won't have Blob eating, what was it, the wasp?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this won't have anything like that in it, but... So with that, let's get into the stories of All American Comics 16. So I think with past issues, I've never taken the time to mention the artist and the writer for these individual stories. And so I'm putting in the effort to make that change starting now. Of course, as I was going through this, I noticed that not all the stories had writers and artists attached to it, from what I could tell at least. And so if I don't mention any, that's why I just didn't see any listed. So All American Comics 16 starts with Green Lantern by Mart Dellin and Bill Finger. And I will mention later in our random trivia why Mart Dellin is listed instead of Martin Nodell. And so, yeah, first story is Green Lantern. It begins in tragedy within the first few panels. Alan Scott is heading up the construction of the bridge that the train he's in is currently going over. His company ended up winning a bid to build the bridge, which leads to fears of a rival company by Decker to retaliate. And basically, as this is being brought up, suddenly the train careens off the bridge, killing everyone on the train but Alan Scott. And as Alan kind of comes out of the wreckage and everything, he realizes he's holding on to this lantern. And as he's noticing this, he gets lightheaded. He lays down and faints, and then the panels light up with green light, and a voice comes from the lantern telling the story of the Green Lantern.
Have Have you read Doomsday Clock?
I've read bits and pieces of it.
Okay, so do you mind if I spoil Doomsday Clock?
Oh yeah, I've kind of already read the end and everything. So
So you know of this particular story's involvement in
Mhm.
Doomsday Clock? Okay, so with Rebirth, you find out that Doctor Manhattan's button, or the comedian's button, is in the DC universe, and it turns out that Doctor Manhattan has been screwing with the timeline, and yeah, it turns out everything changed because he made it so Alan Scott died in the train crash, and never, like, he basically just realigned the lantern, and turns out that was the key to everything.
Yep.
So I never expected I expected Jeff Johns to do something Green Lantern related with Alan Scott, but I was not expecting that.
Well, it's kind of nice to see like a lot of these old characters who are kind of put into the background compared to, you know, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all them, to be like, you know what, let's give them a sense of importance like today. Like, yeah, they're not the biggest character, but everything would be changed if, just one of them was not here. So I kind of do appreciate that. I wasn't crazy about a lot of what I read in Doomsday Clock, but I do kind of like the idea that Alan Scott does have that bit of importance to change everything if he wasn't here. So with the story of the Green Lantern, it begins in ancient China, where a green meteor comes crashing down and it ends up splitting open that showcases some green liquid inside. There are people who are there to check it out, and as they gather around, they hear something from the meteor. And the meteor states, 3 times shall I flame green. First, to bring death. Second, to bring life. Third, to bring power. So a man named Chang, who is apparently evil because he reads scary books on sorcery, claims that he knew it would come because of a book he read. He gathers material from the meteor and begins to make a lamp out of it. And people, assuming the worst of Chang, decide to attack him as he's doing his crafting. And as that happens, the lamp begins to shine this bright green light. And as it forewarned, its first light would bring death, and it kills everyone in the room. And then after that, it's kind of passed on. We see the green lamp being picked up from a trash can outside of an asylum in America. And the whole idea is that the people who found it are going to give it to Old Billings. He's a harmless old coot who makes lanterns out of metal. And so they do just that. And Old Billings makes a lantern, and he lights the wick to get it going. And the lantern shines for a second time, which means it's bringing life. Billings, who is formerly insane, walks out of the asylum completely sane. A little weirded out that someone in asylum can just simply walk out like that, but you know what? It was the 40s. Who knows?
Yeah, these days they just like they would just knock him down and just shove pills into his mouth.
Yep. And so here it is again, lying next to Alan Scott, and it shines for a third time, bringing power. And this is specifically the power to fight evil. It will reside within him as long as he has the willpower and faith within himself. And to avoid having to carry this lantern everywhere, it suggests to Alan that he should forge a ring and touching the lantern to grant the ring its power. But it has to recharge every 24 hours. And as the light starts to fade, it says one last thing: the Green Lantern, to shed light upon dark evil. Now, Alan wonders if this was all a dream, but once he picks up the lantern, it kind of gives him this like feeling of energy flowing through his body. And then he picks up the body of his friend Jimmy, the one who warned him about Decker. And now Alan is upset. He wants revenge on Decker. So he goes home, he makes a ring using the metal from the lantern, The ring is shaped like the lantern itself. On top, the emblem to fight evil. Putting it on his hand, the thirst for revenge dissipates, and knows he has to go about doing this in a different way. But first, he has to test his powers. So he's like, just thinking that he wants to fly to Decker's, and then suddenly the ring begins to fly him there, to Allan's surprise. He arrives at Decker's house and wishes he could go, in his own words, through the fourth dimension to be able to go through objects. And then the ring lets him do that too. So, as one would expect from any story in the 40s with villains, Decker's in the room talking with his boys, praising them out loud for blowing up this bridge.
I don't know about you, but in my internal reading voice, I had Decker sound like Joe Pesci.
He was just like the generic 40 mafia member to me, which is kind of Joe Pesci-ish. So,
I mean, considering it happens later on in the story.
yeah. So yeah, they notice this green figure of Alan Scott coming through the wall, and then as they try and shoot him, the bullets bounce off. And so they try to stab him, and the knife breaks. But then they club him over the head and knock him down. And so I don't know how Alan came to this conclusion here, but clearly the only reason that worked is because the club was made of wood. Metals apparently will not harm him. I don't know how he could come to that quick of a conclusion off of just, those few things, but yeah.
I mean, at the time, every character had to have a certain gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Superman being vulnerable to kryptonite, then the magic, then to extra dimensional beings, and actually then eventually with Green Lantern, yellow, just anything yellow.
Yep.
And I hate that I'm going to make another reference to the Big Bang Theory, but they said that they joked saying a number 2 pencil would kill Alan Scott.
I mean, they're not wrong. So yeah, after he gets knocked down, he begins to fight back, and he notes how his strength has remained the same. And as Decker's goons run off, Alan threatens Decker. Decker pleads for friendship, so Alan grabs him and starts flying off, as other heroes tend to do. He threatens to drop Decker, but Decker says he'll confess if Alan spares his life. They fly back. Decker signs a confession, and then immediately dies from shock. That's one way to take care of a character, I suppose. If you don't want to just take him to jail or anything. Just immediate death. So from there, Alan Scott commits himself to fight against evil. His plan is to have a costume that's so bizarre that once he is seen, he will never be forgotten. And thus, the Green Lantern is born. Well, anything you want to say about that story before we go downhill from there?
Well, it's sort of started going downhill by the time when when Decker dies, and Alan Scott's just sheer not even caring a bit about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that last page or two was very felt kind of rushed, and how they were just trying to finish everything off really quick.
I mean, I get that he's supposed to have superhuman strength because of the ring's abilities, but the way they hit him, he even that, and if he has superhuman ability or superhuman strength, wouldn't the bat have just broke?
You would think,
because that's how. I mean, I don't know how superhero physics work.
It's one of those things you have to focus on being hit to not be hurt from it or something. It's weird. I'm going to bring up a Dragon Ball Z reference here. So, Goku, one of the strongest men in the universe, can take blasts that can destroy entire planets. And yet he can be sitting there taking a nap. Krillin can just lightly toss over a rock and hit him in the head. And he seems to be hurt more from that than half of what's done to him by all these villains. It's just this weird kind of Like, if they're not prepared for it, it always seems to hurt a lot more, even if what's hitting them is nowhere near as harmful as, you know, the things they're normally taking. It's weird. So from there, we get to Hop Harrigan, and this is by John Elby. I was kind of surprised to see Hop Harrigan here because he was in one of our previous episodes. I think it was it All Star Comics number 3? I think. When we saw Hop Harrigan last time, it wasn't even like an illustrated issue. It was just like the newspaper, which there's another story like that in this one, but it was all text, no pictures in that one. This one here, we actually get to see what Hop looks like. So, oh, here we go, Alan. So we see Hop excited, seeing letters from kids wanting to join his flying club. However, his friend and big-time mechanic, Icky, thinks it sounds absurd. They notice that Icky is hiding a black eye. Icky comments and resents something that Canvasback Kelly. God, sounds like a slur. Canvasback Kelly.
Yeah, and I actually thought, because of the way the lettering was, I thought it was inky.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but I put Icky. I think I could be wrong. I looked over that in other pages quite a few times, but yeah, it's kind of hard to tell based on how the print is. But because I thought it was Inky originally, but unless my eye was playing tricks on me, I think it's Icky, which is just a dumb name. But yeah, apparently Canvasback Kelly didn't like Icky's plane. And then they hear a radio announcement coming on saying that Canvasback, God, I hate saying this name over and over again. Canvasback Kelly failed a rescue attempt of saving a woman and her baby, and now they're all stranded on the island. Apparently, Canvasback Kelly is not able to take off on the island anymore. And so Icky takes this as a challenge to show Canvasback Kelly how great their planes are. So Hop and Icky take off and arrive at the island as the flooded river gets closer to taking over the whole thing. Hop lands first and says he'll take the woman and the child, and Icky will be taking Kelly with him. Hop takes off, and as he does, Icky and Kelly share insults about each other's planes. Kelly punches Icky and knocks him out, only to notice that the water is getting higher. Hop arrives at All American Field, which I kind of like that nod to the comic name. But the doctor there says that they need antitoxins from the city, which is too far for anyone, even by plane, to make it there and back in time to save the woman and child. But at that time, they end up receiving a phone call from the city hospital where Kelly took Icky. They say that Icky got something in his other eye. And then we see them telling Kelly about the antitoxins. And just as he's about to agree to help, Icky comes in and knocks him out from behind with the sound effect of Boppo. Then the people back at All American Field are wondering where Icky and Kelly are when a plane arrives. It's Doc Stevens, who luckily can fly a plane. Wash, who I'm assuming is their boss, scolds them for fighting. And Kelly apologizes for what he said, and both him and Icky hug. And so because Doc Stevens is the one who used Icky's plane, basically his plane is what saved the day. So Doc Stevens ends up buying one because he's a doctor, and I guess he can just throw money down like that. And then they decide to tour with this positive press about how his plane helped save a woman and a child. So the first thing they do is fly to the farm of the two that they saved and learn that the farmer there is having problems with bugs. And so in an effort to help, they show a quicker way of solving this problem by kind of rigging the plane in a way to where they can sweep over their crocs with their bug powder. And after they do this, farmers from all around hear about it and decide that they can use a plane like that too for all the good it can do for them. And so they all decide to buy planes, and the kids around the area want to join Hop's aviation club as well. One of the farmers asks if he buys a plane, will Icky teach his family how to fly? And Icky agrees. But whoops, the man has a family of like 15 or so. So, yeah. Poor Icky, I guess.
At a certain point, I had some weird like alternative narrative where like the doctor was like there was some hostile thing happening, and and like the doctor turned out to be a bad guy, and there's like I thought it was like a hostage situation.
That
At least it
probably
was,
that
yeah, it
would
would
make
have
the
been
story
better.
more exciting. Yeah, the story is just
It was not good.
no. And then they do that thing at like the last page or two where it's like, oh, we're gonna fly this farm, and then all these farmers are just gonna suddenly buy planes too. After I, yeah. So I told you about this before we started recording, but so anyone listening, there are several different stories that are taken from newspaper reprints of just like Sunday comics, basically. I'm not going to talk about any of those. I don't care about Mutt and Jeff. I don't care about Daisy Bell. No, just they're Sunday comics. You kind of know what to expect, and I'm not going to waste anybody's time doing those. So next is Red, White, and Blue. Like this very beginning part, I feel like I'm missing something as I was reading it. So the Pacific Fleet is out to boost confidence in its naval power. So they're taking part of war games.
War games! Of war games! War games! War games!
Then there is a small fishing boat out on the water with 3 people on board named Red, Whitey, and Bluey. Per orders from their government, they have to find a tanker flying a foreign flag and crash into it. But this tanker happens to have the Wasp, who is one of the most brilliant spies the world has ever seen. And as they're approaching the tanker, the spy notices them, but lets them continue doing their thing. They collide with the tanker, and the tanker crew bring them aboard, but as punishment for crashing into them, they're thrown into the prison where they meet Professor Pendennis, a world-famous munitions expert. And Pendennis tells this, it's literally 2 panels. He goes into it like it's going to be this long, thought-out story, but it's a 2-panel story of creating a new anti-aircraft gun for battleships and then being kidnapped in this next panel. And now he's on this boat. So Captain Markov is the one who tortured him for details on the anti-aircraft gun, but Pendennis held strong and didn't leak any sort of details. Now, the naval fleet isn't far off and see this tanker, but they can't do anything due to laws protecting them. Night falls, and a submarine pulls up next to the tanker. The man on the sub goes to meet the Wasp, and the Wasp basically tells him that he wants the sub to move towards the warships and that the tanker will follow with mines. And so from there, we move back to the capture Red, Whitey, and Bluey people, and someone is bringing them food. But Whitey shows his strength and lifts the man up, I think with one arm over his head like he was Superman in Action Comics #1.
That is, oh man, that just singular panel is better than all of this.
So as this person had walked in, apparently this man knew their names, and Bluey catches that they knew him. And so apparently this man bringing food is Doris West, who is a government agent. Doris removes her disguise and decides to use her stunning good looks to sway the guards. And I'm assuming this meant something different in the 1940s.
Oh my.
According to the panel, it says, and I quote, unnoticed, while the sailor tries to make love to Doris, the trio comes over. I thought they were just going to be flirting right there, so I don't know if making love is lingo for flirting in the 40s, but I had to take like a double take on that one because I'm like, is he going to rape her? I don't know what he's doing right here. So yeah, they come out, take that sailor out, and then Red, Whitey, and Bluey go ham on the rest of the men on the ship, and Red runs into the Wasp, pushing him over into a boat as he watches the loading of the mines onto it. And then the three men jump onto the boat, but the Wasp seems unfazed, knowing the sub will help even if they warn the fleet. They still need to save Doris, though, who they left back on the tanker. They see the sub rise, but Red threatens to blow themselves up with the Wasp if they come closer. Wasp tries to bargain and call them off. As the U-boat pulls away, the sub hits the mines that the crew left in the water. They pull the boat around to the side of the tanker and catch a discussion where they figured out Doris is a U.S. agent. Markov is planning to take care of her and the professor, but the men interrupt and Red knocks out Captain Markov. Suddenly, sailors break in with guns in hand, and lucky for them, the men are on their side. And then it ends with a flash forward to San Diego, and the crew is trying to figure out what to do next while they wait for new orders. God, I hated that story, Alan. Oh, God, I hate the story. Next is Ben Webster by Edwin Alger. Okay, so this story seems to be a continuation. It says that Ben and his dog are trying to help a Miss Terry and has already been on the run from pursuers. I guess Miss Terry is taking him to some large mansion, and after she gets there, her maid or whatever refers to her as Your Highness, and the maid brings them tea. However, the tea that's given to Ben seems to be laced with something, and he passes out. And it's here that we see that Miss Terry, there's something to Miss Terry. She is working with someone named Rufus, who I'm assuming this person was shown in a previous story. And they're looking for information on something called the magic mud. So Ben wakes up and Rufus meets him in the bedroom he was taken into, and Rufus plays dumb into the story about Ben helping the princess. And when Ben tells him they passed out after drinking tea, Rufus claims both him and the princess must have been drugged. So Rufus runs back to Miss Terry, whose name is Vivian. So the two of them can kind of get their story straight before they keep talking with Ben. From here, we see that Ben has a couple friends. One of their names is Taffy Tate, and the other is Betsy Betts.
This is lazy writing.
It's just lazy. Taffy Tate and Betsy Betts are at a beauty parlor wondering where Ben went to. Apparently, they're thinking he must be in danger because he has been absent for 6 whole hours. Rufus devises a plan to use some truth serum on Ben to learn about the magic mud, and Vivian decides to mix it in with some tea since Ben thinks the tea is drugged. Wait, what did I just say?
Not milk.
Mixed it with milk since the tea is drugged. When Vivian takes Ben milk, Ben's dog is excited to see her because they've been traveling this whole time, and it causes her to get distracted. Ben is unsure whether or not this is all a trap, so he decides to switch the milk glasses while she's preoccupied with the doggo. And so Vivian takes a drink of the milk and starts speaking truths. She's not a princess. The truth serum was supposed to be in his milk, not hers. And that they want details on whatever this magic mud stuff is. Just yapping away. And so she details their plan on how they learned about this magic mud at a beauty shop that, I'm guessing it's the beauty shop that Taffy and Betsy were at. And that Rufus was planning on using this for his own financial gain. So he wanted Vivian to pretend to be in danger so they could ultimately get Ben to tell them the magic mud secrets. So Rufus comes in and berates Vivian for failing again as she's just verbal diarrhea, all this information. But Ben isn't just going to sit there and let them continue on. So he pushes Rufus aside and dashes out the door. However, as he is almost out the front door, a few other men working for Rufus and Vivian stop Ben. And that's where the story ends. And it says it will continue in the follow-up issue, which I will not read. So sorry, Ben. Okay. Popsicle Pete, the typical American boy. Three guys are talking about how they have $2,500 but no idea how to spend it. Out of nowhere, this dude with a beard just walks in and says that he knows how they can invest it in him. For he has a 24-cent stamp under his beard. But supposedly it's a collector stamp worth thousands of dollars. But he'll part with it for $2,500. One of the guys thinks this is a good idea. He heard a stamp like this is worth a lot of money, so it's possible that's real. Plus, he doesn't know what else to do with $2,500. And the third guy agrees because apparently he's tired of being rich. I wish I was exaggerating on any of that, but no, this is quite literally the conversation that's going on. And so, lo and behold, it looks like the stamp is a fake. The airplane on the stamp is upside down. But they don't want to just rip up the stamp because it costs them $2,500. But one of them has a father who is a postman. And so, since this is a stamp, they're going to ask him, thinking he'll have the best idea of what to do with it. Instead, he tells them to go to a banker who he knows that's a stamp collector. So they go and do that and find out that it actually is valuable, at least $4,000 worth. Because the plane has been printed upside down, apparently there's only a few hundred that exist. And so the banker is willing to give them a loan for $4,000 using the stamp as collateral and suggests that they go into a stamp exchange business venture. And they leave that, they leave with $4,000 and feel pretty good about their new business plan. So the first thing they do, I guess, is order a box load of foreign stamps. And then as they're wondering what to do from there, a woman shows up wanting a stamp. But as she notices all like this like pallet of stamps that is like waist high, she says that she can write them up. I guess she's a reporter. I don't know. So millions of people collect stamps, even President Roosevelt. And so they decide to write up their stamps, but we won't know for sure until next issue. Such an exciting story, Alan.
Yeah, they didn't even tell us who Popsicle Pete was.
I was sitting there trying to figure that out, like waiting for someone to say, "Hey, Pete," or "Popsicle" or something. No, nothing.
Maybe Popsicle Pete was the first or third guy?
Maybe. I don't.
Maybe Popsicle Pete was the guy who had the stamp in his beard. It's just a reverse narrative.
It's just like, how do you go through a story and not say a single person's name in it? Like 6 characters and you don't name a single one of them? Like, come on. Oh, God, it's this one. So this is the Hop Harrigan-like story from All-Star Comics number 3, where I think there's one picture and everything else was just text. So it's called Trader's Treachery, a Jimmy Stone story. And this is another one we are kind of jumping in the middle of, and this is part 3. So let's piece together everything here. So Jimmy Stone is helping his friend Phil Hackett track down stolen passports and papers from the State Department. His investigation has led him to a place of gambling where he sees a group of people, a Miss Trent, a Burroughs, Nate Brown, and another man without a name currently, who they just call the Tall Man. So while Jimmy is looking over the gambler Nate Brown, he's surprised from behind and pushed into the room. Burroughs is angry, and Jimmy is torn. Apparently these two know each other, and Jimmy trusted him, and now he's feeling betrayed. As the gang just tries to decide what to do with Jimmy, the Tall Man speaks up about how his boat is leaving soon, and that they may just drug Jimmy up and dump him off at sea, never to be seen again. The cabbie that took Jimmy there busts in with a gun in hand as Ivan, who is the Tall Man, tries to react by grabbing his weapon. The cabbie fires and takes Ivan down. Police show up immediately, and then to everyone's surprise, the cabbie reveals himself to be Phil Hackett. Once the other members are taken to jail, Hackett runs through about how he was suspicious about Miss Trent and how she lived with Burroughs. Since then, he had trailed her but kept Jimmy in the dark about the whole thing. Burroughs and Miss Trent owed Nate Brown some debt, and they were going to be paid by Ivan as he deals with state secrets and smuggled passports, and then in turn, pay off their debt with Nate Brown. And so Jimmy's filled with pride and says nobody can beat Uncle Sam. And Phil comments, because this country is founded on real ideals, and the people rule, not one man. In America, every man is his own master. Always remember that. And Jimmy is proud to be a real American, just like Phil.
Last year, if this story took place last year, that would have been a whole different story.
Just really trying to.
Jimmy would be in Siberia, having been sent there by the president himself.
Yep. And more likely, Phil probably would have been helping people during that insurrection a few weeks back.
I think Phil would have been a QAnon believer.
He absolutely would have been, dressing up as cabbies and stuff. Come on now. Okay, so next story is Adventures in the Unknown, The Infrared Destroyers by Carl H. Claudy. Yet another story we're just kind of jumping into the middle of. Apparently, Alan Kane is a man who suspects an attack from invisible aliens from Venus, but is kidnapped. Only after leaving a note for his friend, Ted Dolliver, Ted rushes to his aid. We see another man telling machine. I'm assuming it's a machine. There's the word balloon actually covers what this thing is. So, yeah, thanks whoever came up with that. To destroy another block of buildings, which happens in the next panel in New York. And it feels like the story is just kind of bouncing everywhere at this point. Cops are looking for an anarchist to no avail. People are leaving the city. People are dying in the streets. Building on fire. Mass chaos. We see Alan guarded by the invisible creature who is clawing at him. And Alan, who is making his plan abundantly clear, just yelling it out loud to this alien, trying to get the creature to slice through his ropes with the sharp claws. And, of course, it works, because this is the 40s, and and just sitting in the same room, because this invisible creature from Venus is not enough, Alan finds a hypodermic needle and a bottle of poison. The alien sits and waits for him to fill this up, apparently. And then Alan is able to get the alien with it and sees a gray powder fall to the floor. I'm not sure what's going on here, Alan.
I mean, I found this hypodermic needle. I gotta use it to kill this alien.
So he's then surprised by Professor Jurgens. Jurgens is trying to find out how Alan is going to fight the spacemen from Venus, seemingly so they can't actually be stopped. So he ties up Alan again, leaving the alien's name is now Olak to watch over him again. So apparently he didn't kill. I don't know what's going on. I thought he killed the alien, and then Olak still ends up showing up. So I don't know. Ted is on his way, but Jurgens is notified of it, so he sends someone to knock Ted off the road, but Ted still gets away unscathed. He walks the rest of the way to Jurgens' lab, only for something to cause him to pass out. He wakes up, lassoed on a bed, and the man waiting for him is trying to feed him. Ted distracts the man by telling him to get Ted a cigarette, and the man actually agrees to this, and I have no idea why. And so when the man kind of leans over to do it, Ted kicks him in the head, which knocks him out, and then he rolls off the bed. He grabs a butter knife and then spends 30 minutes cutting himself free. Literally 30 minutes. He is actually, I can't remember if he says it or it's like a narrative bubble, saying it spends half an hour cutting himself free. So I don't know if he just knocked the man out or actually killed him with that shot to the head, but Ted goes over what he has on himself. His gun is gone, but he still has a knife and glasses that, quote unquote, make infrared rays visible, which I'm sure will come in handy for this. He also takes the rope that had him bound. Ted leaves the room and starts looking at the house, determining which room Allan might be in, which confused me because I assumed he would have been in the exact same house, so I don't know why he would have left it. I don't know. Again, there's a lot to this story. I'm just not. That's not clicking with me, apparently. So he hides as Jurgens is walking nearby, and he's notified that Ted has escaped. So he tells the Venus men to start searching for him. He then he's standing outside. Ted is right there. He points to the exact room Allan is in and tells these alien creatures that probably know exactly where Allan is in the first place not to let Ted in there. After some stumbling with getting up to the window, Ted finally succeeds. But seeing Allan warns Ted not to come in. He says, "There's death here." And the story ends. Cliffhanger to leave you wanting to read more. This story I did not mind so much. It's called Scribbly.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sheldon Mayer he's a talented writer.
Yeah, he is. Plus it has, I'm an animal lover, so kind of seeing this it kind of touched me in a way, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, the story is called Scribbly by Sheldon Mayer. Again, another one we must have just been walking into. After succeeding in riding the man-killing horse Widowmaker, Scribbly is feeling full of himself. The people who own the horse decide that because a kid could ride him, Widowmaker isn't worth keeping. Now we see Widowmaker's thoughts, and he's angry. He went easy on Scribbly, and now he will show them just how tough he can be. But before he leaves, Scribbly decides to visit Widowmaker one more time and give him a carrot. And Widowmaker's touched. To him, this is the first nice thing someone has actually done for him. Widowmaker feels weird. What are these feelings? As Scribbly boards a train with his family, we see Widowmaker up for auction. He doesn't like this, so he decides to escape and leaps over a fence. Widowmaker is now alone without any friends, but he thinks he sees Scribbly in the window of the train that passes. So he follows the tracks. As he kind of ventures on his little Milo and Otis story here, Widowmaker isn't having a good time. He almost gets hit by a train. He finds a stream to get a drink of water, only to have kids suddenly appear and throw rocks at him. And all the time he's wondering what he did and why everyone is against him. So a few days later, he finds the Hudson and decides to cross it. On the other side is a city. And just so happens to be the city that Scribbly is in. So we see Scribbly thinking of Widowmaker, but also how he knows Widowmaker ran away. Apparently they followed him a ways until they got to the Hudson, and now there's a good chance that this horse is loose in the city. So Scribbly goes out for a walk, and pretty much immediately after walking out the front door, we see Widowmaker turn the corner attached to a buggy, and the dude on the buggy is like screaming at him about how he found him on the street, and he's trying to feed him, and he won't eat the food he's being given, yada yada yada. So Scribbly sees him and screams his name, and both Scribbly and Widowmaker run to each other, and Widowmaker kicks the buggy, knocking off the man who's verbally berating him, and Scribbly now owns a horse. Just a little feel-good story about a kid finding a new pet, basically.
Yeah, and a certain part of it felt like it was written by Don Bluth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this was probably, this and the Green Lantern story are the only two I could say I really fully enjoyed. So let's continue on to Gary Concord, The Ultraman by Dan Shelby. So far in the future of 2240 AD, we see a sealed uranium power plant beneath the sea. This is Gary Concord's invention of atom smashing that is capable of powering thousands of homes, but suddenly stops working. We see hospitals go dark, children starving, industries unable to provide work for people. And then Senator Jones of the United States of North America's Committee on Power decides to visit Gary Concord, the Ultraman, and his daughter Ginger wants to go too. She really wants to meet Gary. As soon as they arrive, Ginger falls all over him, trying to convince him to go swimming with her and her friends. Her father and Gary brush her aside. Gary Concord and his companion Alec head towards Bayona Banks, where the power plant lies. When they get there, they see a catapult where Gary Concord previously blew up Doc Marmon's castle and destroyed his monsters. They also see Ginger just chilling there, waiting for someone to swim with her, which my question is, how the hell did she get there so fast? Like, they actually took like this flying car to get to where they were, and she's just there. I don't know. So Gary, not wanting to deal with Ginger, decides to throw on a deep sea suit to avoid her. And then suddenly a strange craft appears and kidnaps Ginger. It begins taking her out to sea. So Gary Concord jumps into the catapult and Alec fires him out towards the craft. He makes it, holds on tight, and they dive underwater. The craft ends up taking him to where the power plant is, or in this case, used to be, because now there's like this dark hole and the craft descends into it. So Gary peeks in through the window to check on Ginger and sees an ape fish, which is like this kind of greenish monkey with some fins on its body. They arrive at an underwater city, and then they see Ginger being pulled out from this gang of ape fish. As Gary looks around, he locates Doc Marmon, who he thought was dead. But nope, they captured him and kept him prisoner, though now he has been saved. The Garu monster is the one responsible for his capture and the whole city. Gary and Marmon go on the search for Ginger, and when they find her, Gary leaps in and fights the ape fish. They escape with the Garu on their tail, and I'm not entirely sure how to describe it. I put he looks like a weird robot skeletal thing. But yeah, they try to lock him out, and it does for a little bit, just long enough for Gary and Ginger to escape. But Marmon isn't able to hop aboard, but he sets off explosions that destroy the entire city. Fortunately, Gary and Ginger are able to make it back to Alec. Ginger is afraid Gary will inform her dad of what happened, but he says he won't as long as she stops annoying him. More Ultraman next month.
This is your hero. I don't want to talk to you. Get away from me.
Basically, like, God, this woman's annoying. Like, please stop, go away. Why did I save you? I don't know. But yeah, that's All American Comics number 16. Yeah, there really is no words. I was not very thrilled after reading this story. It was cool to see the origin of Green Lantern. It was nice to have a little kid story with getting a new friend and a pet, but a lot of these stories were just a slog to get through. And it sounds like you had a very similar experience that I did.
I just wanted this book. I just want this whole thing to end and end and end.
And now it is. It's over. We can move on to random trivia, which I have a number of them here, but I think we can knock it out pretty quick. So. So unlike the majority of the stories, the first appearance of Green Lantern has been reprinted numerous times over the years. You can find this story in books like The Golden Age Green Lantern Archives, Volume 1, Green Lantern, A Celebration of 75 Years, and many more. So I mentioned this at the very beginning, but the first issue of Green Lantern is credited by Mart Dellin and Bill Finger. So Mart is short for Martin, obviously, and Dellin was Nodell mixed up. So the reason this happened is because Nodell wasn't sure how long he would be working in comics, and during that time, many people were against comic books. So Nodell came up with a pseudonym to avoid any problems that could arise if he were to leave comics and go into advertising, which is something he was planning on doing. But it wasn't until Green Lantern #1 where he was kind of forced into using his name. The people behind the book wanted to do a double page spread showing Bill Finger and Martin Nodell's real faces. And so when they decided to do that, they decided to use his real name. So, yeah, Mart Dellin no longer existed after Green Lantern 1. So, when he first started doing pages, Nodell was making $10 a page. That would eventually increase to $20 per page. He said he was able to churn out 5 to 7 pages a week prior to doing Green Lantern #1. And so this would net him between $100 to $140 a week when the average person was only making $35 a week back in the 40s. So Nodell was making bank doing comics. I should have looked at what inflation would have been. So something else we also talked about is that despite having the name Green Lantern, Alan Scott is not technically affiliated with the Green Lantern Corps normally. So in fact, the Corps themselves wouldn't be a thing until Showcase #22 in 1959. However, DC would try to link Alan Scott's origin to the Green Lantern Corps many years later in Green Lantern Volume 2, #112. In this issue, they would detail how the Guardians gathered wild magic and would fuse it all into the Starheart. And after the Guardians sent it away, a piece of it came off after gaining self-awareness, where it traveled to Earth 2 in the shape of a meteor after hooking on space debris throughout its time and space. And then they would put in another connection in Volume 3 of Green Lantern, #19, by saying his green flame of life is the spirit of a former member, Yalan Gur, who had previously been corrupted by power after his weakness to yellow had been removed. Have you read either of those stories?
No, but I think I'm probably going to after
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I know I haven't read it, but I really should, because both of those sound far more interesting than anything else we've read in this book. So there is thought to be less than 100 copies of this book still intact in the world. A CGC grade of 6.5 was sold for $300,000 in 2018, and rumored that a 9.4 copy would go for at least $1 million. It said even a low grade copy of a 2.0 would bring in at least $35,000. I think that's because there actually was a bid at one point for that. But yeah, old comics make a lot of money, especially this one. And so I have two here that kind of touch back on the origin story. So Alan's origin was revamped a little when it came to the new 52 Earth 2 story. And so in it, he takes a trip with his boyfriend Samuel through Hong Kong, but the train explodes as Alan tries to propose. And then the ring becomes his source of power, and he becomes an agent for the Green. Do you want to expand on that origin a little bit, or just leave it there?
Oh, the Earth 2 stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't really like the Earth 2 retelling or I liked what James Robinson was doing, but I didn't like how it was handled by writers after he left.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like after he left, everything just kind of started being thrown against the wall. I felt like it never felt very cohesive after that. I felt like it jumped around a lot. Just, yeah.
Yeah, the stuff that when Earth 2 Society first launched, I just hated it. And ironically, it was when Dan Abnett took over that I started getting really back into it. And then it ended because Rebirth.
Hmm.
And ironically, the Reds, like their person was Yolanda Montez,
Mm-hmm.
which they didn't even give any time for that too, because they find her in, I think, either like Earth 2 World's End.
Sounds right, yeah.
Then in Convergence, she disappears. Like something happens to her, and she's never heard from again. She still hasn't been heard from.
Oh, jeez.
And it was a big deal because she hadn't been seen that. Like, she was the second Wildcat.
I'm kind of surprised they wouldn't have done anything else with her.
Yeah, considering the Stargirl show.
Oh, is she in that?
Yeah, there was a very dark moment that happens in the finale.
Oh no.
Like no, I mean like that she does a villain.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Like it's a kid it's a family friendly show, except for that scene.
So yeah, I mean, the one thing I liked about Alan's origin in Earth 2 is that it does kind of
It's
plays out
more
a little similar, but
it's a little variation of the new timeline.
yeah. Like, it was nice that he still experiences a train exploding and the people aren't dying. I liked how they still worked in, Hong Kong to have that Chinese touch from the original as well. But, what can you do?
Yeah, yeah. I think I remember reading in an interview that there was going to be the first big DC hero was going to be revealed as gay,
Mm-hmm.
and there were so many wild different theories, and when James Robinson explained it, like at first, like I'm sure people were like, "No, this is ruining childhoods that we weren't even alive for." But then like James Robinson explained that Obsidian, who is Alan Scott's son,
Mm-hmm.
he is gay in the comics, and also in live action when he was played by Lance Henriksen on Legends of Tomorrow, which that is a great episode.
Yeah, so you brought up about Alan being gay, and I remember when that all started happening and all those really dumb jokes about, of course, the gay man's, weakness is wood. It's like, oh, gosh, you people. I hated it. I hated having to deal with those forums at that time. He's gay. Get over it. Come on. Well, that kind of still carried over because James Tynion IV and Gary Frank kind of have it's pretty similar to the original, more so than Earth 2, but very much hint that he's probably still gay. So they do this in the Green Lantern 80th Anniversary Spectacular, and they do a story called Dark Things Cannot Stand the Light. And this is where Alan Scott visits the mother of his good friend Jimmy. And they kind of hint that Jimmy and him have a relationship without just coming right out and saying it. But it kind of flashes back throughout the similar beats of the original story, from the train crashing, him going through the wall to find the crooks, stuff like that. And then he reveals himself to her as the Green Lantern. So it's kind of nice to see like a more modern take on the original story, especially with Gary Frank, who's such an amazing artist. So, and then the last thing I have here is one I was not expecting to find when I ran across it. So Martin O'Dell did end up leaving to go to advertising, and he joined the Leo Burnett agency. Apparently, his design team would go on to create a character that I think everybody knows and loves, the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Well, I have a feeling that the overweight people who were bullied and called that name were not probably aren't happy that exists.
True. I know I had that call plenty. I've had plenty of people poking my stomach for me to go, but I still love the Pillsbury Doughboy. He's a really cute design and
Very, very kid friendly.
very kid friendly. But yeah, I was not expecting that the father of Green Lantern would have ties to the Pillsbury Doughboy. But that's it. That's all I have for All American Comics 16. I don't really know what to say about it. It led to a character that would very much influence a lot of DC Comics in the future, even if it was kind of tangentially with the Green Lantern Corps and everything. But
Well, Alan's like Jay Garrick. Alan Scott has mentor role with Hal Jordan that Jay Garrick has with Barry Allen
Mm-hmm.
/ Wally West / Bart Allen / oh, I'm not even going so much. Yeah,
The Flash
it's,
family.
yeah, it's weird that there's no Green Lantern family.
Yeah, you'd imagine
I
that
mean,
they would
I mean,
all.
technically, the Green Lantern family is basically every single like Earth Green Lantern, and then Kilowog because
Yeah,
he is a fan favorite.
yeah. It was cool to see the original story and to kind of learn about kind of how it came to be. But man, I'm really disappointed in the other stories. Really kind of dragged down the book as a whole. But not everyone's a winner. Is there anything you want to comment on before I head up into the outro?
I'm glad I never have to read it again.
Me too. I think I haven't looked at our schedule, but I might take a little break of the stories from the 40s and stuff for a little bit. I'm excited for what we have coming up the next few weeks, though. So yeah, if you like everything you hear, please spread the word. Spread the word of the podcast. Tell people about us. Rate and review if you want to, but getting who we are out there probably helps us better than any of that stuff. So yeah, share us on forums, on Twitter, wherever you talk to other people about comics at. Share them the good that Hypertime to podcast brings you every other week. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at HypertimePod. If you have questions or suggestions on things you would like us to look into, feel free to leave them there. You can also email us at hypertime, the number 2 podcast at gmail.com. We are part of a larger site in VGU.tv, so you can check out content that we have on the site. You can check out other podcasts that we do that is more video game related in Players Club podcast and Win, which is the Weekend News podcast. So check those out. Check out the YouTube. Follow us on Twitter there as well at VGU_TV. So yeah, if you like video games, check us out there, please. Then you can follow me on Twitter at jmillie99. That's JMILLE99. And Alan, it's your time now to shine.
So you can find me on Twitter at the Alamir. That's ALLAN, not ALAN, not ALLEN. Muir, MUIR, and
Alan's tweet of the bye week
is simply something from 2 hours ago. Was not expecting to hear Echo and the Bunnymen on something DC related. Misfits still has the best use of them.
Misfits. I must have missed something. What's
Misfits was a show that British show that had people like a storm. There was a storm that gave a bunch of probation workers basically powers.
Huh? I was like, is Alan talking about the old band, or is he talking about the Gail Simone Batgirl knockoff character Misfit? What is he talking about?
It was on for like 5 years. It had have you seen Umbrella Academy?
I've seen, I think, about half of season 1, but that's one of those shows that my wife likes, and so I can't watch it without her. So we just haven't had time to watch any more of it.
So there's a character on that, Klaus, I think.
Is he the big one?
Well, I'm not sure if it's him.
It's been about a year since I've watched it, so I might be wrong on the names.
The character who's just a bit of a bastard.
Okay, I know who you're talking about.
He was on that. He was on Misfits. It was he ended up getting he left the show after the third season. No, after the second season, and they got Joe Gilligan, who is Cassidy on Preacher, to replace him.
Huh.
And I'm pretty sure that's part of me is convinced that's the reason that he got the role of Cassidy. So, and the DC related thing was Titans season 2, episode 5.
I think I might actually subscribe to, what is it called now? DC Universe Infinite.
They don't have that on it. They only have comics.
So they took off all their. Is it on HBO Max? Is that where they're putting everything
Yeah.
now? Well, crap.
And the thing is, yeah, the terrible part of it is certain shows like Swamp Thing, Titans, Doom Patrol, Stargirl, even more. They were in 4K Ultra HD on DC Universe, and on HBO Max it's just HD, nothing, no 4K, nothing. Yeah, it's a real downgrade.
Huh. Well, I guess that. I mean, I'll probably still get it just because I do love DC, but man, I was really hoping all their film stuff and whatnot, their TV shows and all that would be on there, but
I mean, they're slowly moving things over. So,
well, with that, let's bid everyone adieu. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. We will check you further down the Hypertime, and I hope you all take care. Bye.
This has been a VGU.TV production. For all of the hottest hot takes and other opinions on video games, music, and a lot more, tune in to VGU.TV.